Hi, my name's Hannah Garrity,
Oh, and I'm Natalie Zing.
and this is our presentation on the argument against no-kill shelters for the Animals in Society class.
Group 4. Okay, so to begin with some brief history, animal shelters were originally known as, or referred to as, the pound. And the pound originally came from the word impounded. So animals were kept impounded until their owners came to retrieve them, because usually the animals that were caught are the ones that have ran out of their house or got lost. And so, similar to how cars would be impounded, animals would get impounded as well. Although many animals end up never being returned to their owners, and therefore they were often killed when the pound runs out of space. And because of all the animal deaths that ended up happening, the pound gained a negative connotation and was later renamed to the animal shelter to make it sound more friendly and approachable.
Alright, so this is a brief timeline of the formation of the SPCA, which is a type of humane, independent, nonprofit organization that sprouts individual branches all over the world that share similar values of animal welfare. The first Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals, SPCA, was formed in Britain in 1824, and then later in 1866 the SPCA made its way to the US. Henry Bergh formed the American Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals, but most people ridiculed and opposed him or showed indifference to the animal welfare movement. But the SPCA continued to grow. In 1869, the first official animal shelter was established by the Women's SPCA in Pennsylvania. In 1877, the American Humane Association was formed, and in 1954, the Humane Society of the United States was formed. In between 1960 and 1970, private animal shelters were formed in addition to municipal ones in an effort to bring in strays and find them homes. Public opinion about strays began to shift, and people began to view them as potential pets rather than public health hazards. The no-kill movement started as people taking in strays with the intention of sheltering them rather than killing them, which was common at the time. It began as individual people, and they ended up connecting with each other to form actual groups. And animals are still overpopulating the streets today due to uncontrolled breeding. The movement started spay/neutering programs to curb stray populations in order to make it more manageable for shelters to take them in, rather than euthanizing them to make space. The idea is sound. Lower the wild population so there are no more overpopulation, and then the shelters can take in all the strays without euthanizing any of them, which allows them to get the chance for a happy home. In reality, however, there are a lot of struggles to overcome.
Well, for one of the struggles is that shelters are often overpopulated. Despite the best efforts of no-kill movements and similar ideas, the stray population is still too overwhelming for animal shelters to handle all of them. Additionally, just because the name has been changed does not mean that the impounded meaning is gone. Animals are not meant to be kept for long periods of time before they are adopted or returned to their homes. Even with more animals getting adopted in recent years, more are also brought into shelters every day. Just in recent years, around 6.3 million animals are adopted in shelters each year. 4.1 million are adopted out of shelters afterwards. So doing some quick math, we have like 2.2 million animals that are unaccounted for. And what happens to these animals? Well, they really only have three paths for them. One, they are either kept until their natural death at the shelter which they were brought into, or in cruder words, they are taking up space in the shelters that could be used for other pets. Or if the shelter they're in ends up running out of space, they will be moved and relocated to other shelters in which they will have a similar process but be moved around more often. If the animals are moved around too often, they will naturally be more stressed because, well, they're getting brought into new environments all the time, and this increased stress is also unhealthy for these animals. Or thirdly, they are just euthanized to make more space.
So, as far as ethical aspects go, animals are not meant to be kept in shelters indefinitely. Some strays are accustomed to living independently, and when adopted, they are likely to be returned and labeled as feral and aggressive. Wildlife sanctuaries do not keep animals that are used to the wild indefinitely, so why should shelters do the same for strays? The truth is, some animals have a better chance of being adopted than others. And to make sure that the maximum number of strays get to live good lives, it's best to allow animals that are more likely to be adopted to be kept in shelters. This isn't to advocate for actively killing undesirable animals. Rather, if the choice is between keeping an animal that is more likely to be adopted, therefore freeing up space to take in another animal that is marked as unlikely to be adopted, therefore taking up space in a shelter until death by natural causes, which one would be for the greater good?
Another issue to consider with no-kill shelters is the amount of money that they need to operate. Many animal shelters are non-profit organizations that require funding and donation, and many organizations are facing budget cuts and staffing issues ever since COVID-19, like many other businesses have been. Now, many people have surrendered their pets ever since then as well due to increasing and expensive pet fees. And animals that were adopted during COVID are actually being returned quite often as well because people no longer have the time to take care of them as they used to do since quarantine policies have been lifted. But here's the thing though, the fees that affects the individual owners of these animals that causes them to return those animals to the shelter are also affecting those shelters. So each new animal that is taken in is more food, it's more vet bills, and it's more maintenance. So in addition to space, many shelters simply do not have the resources to keep animals well fed, healthy, and happy. They have to choose between euthanizing unwanted animals to create space or stop intakes of animals altogether. Sometimes, depending on the area they're in and their age and their health, strays actually thrive much better on the streets rather than animal shelters. For example, from personal experience, my family has been leaving some food out for these stray cats that live in our neighborhoods for years. There's this one cat that has a clipped ear that marked him as neutered, and he is big and he is healthy and content with living on the streets in the neighborhood. Now, I'm not saying every animal deserves to live on the streets, but some are perfectly capable and happy of living a good life and do not need to be kept in shelters where other animals may need that space anyways. Anyways, to prove my point, on the right here are two pictures of the cat I was talking about. He is well fed and he is big and he is healthy. So programs like the trap, neuter, and release programs are great for these strays because it prevents them from breeding and possibly passing on any diseases to other cats or to their children possibly. For these animals, it's best to just do routine checkups rather than taking them in altogether. However, there are still a large number of unhealthy strays that suffers on the streets, and when no-kill shelters are at full capacity, they are unable to help those strays. So kill shelters are able to create that space and give more animals a chance at being cared for and adopted into healthy homes. It's sad to say, but it is true. Just because an animal is adoptable doesn't mean that it will be. So on the screen is just a graph we have that just kind of shows off our points. Over the span of a year, this graph starts in May 2021, ends at May 2022. You can see there is a drastic increase in cost of overall pet care over this year. This is about towards the end of COVID, and it's during this time that inflation is high, and pet food, vet bills, and other accessories will become a lot more expensive. So many shelters that support no-kill policies tend to have more trouble with taking in healthy stray animals. They are unable to support new healthy animals being taken in due to overcrowding in the shelters and will refuse to accept people dropping off strays that are healthy, as it is more likely that the stray animals will be released back to the streets or they will be euthanized. Additionally, the crowding in the streets make environments much more stressful, and it's possibly more likely to cause outbreaks of disease in those areas. In which case, it will hardly be safer in the shelters when compared to the animals living on the streets, as we mentioned earlier. Of course, we're not suggesting that animal shelters and their staff would be careless in sanitary conditions, but rather the chances are simply much higher that one animal catches something and somehow spread it to everybody else when the environments are that crowded. But this is added to the fact that shelters are often understaffed as well, as we also mentioned before. It makes it more likely that the animal could come in contact with some kind of contaminated surface that someone accidentally missed and catch something and spread it around. As an example of this overcrowding scenario in shelters and a situation that is closer to home, here is the policy I have on the right here for intaking strays on the Fresno Animal Center questions and answers website. The Fresno Animal Center is a kill shelter, so it does do euthanization, but due to popular opinion, they are trying to keep euthanasia rates low in their shelter regardless by refusing to take in healthy strays. The policy states that the Fresno Animal Center is already at maximum capacity and are not taking in any healthy animals because they will absolutely be euthanized. They read it in the policy right here. They will absolutely be euthanized. And although being a quote unquote no kill shelter is a noble idea, even the shelter that is pro kill is struggling with overcrowding. What would happen if the shelters that are completely no kill is placed in this scenario? In real life, it simply means that there is no space for these animals to be brought into shelters. Due to lack of vacancies, the Fresno Animal Center has been requesting people who pick up stray animals to provide them a temporary shelter while they search for their owners individually. It also states that overcrowding in the shelters is conversely providing unhealthy care and environment to the animals. And currently in Fresno County, most no-kill shelters have similar policies due to overpopulation of strays in the county. It was mentioned in the previous video that we did, part 1, that the amount of strays in the San Joaquin Valley is incredibly high. It leads to having an incredibly high rate of euthanization as well. Yet despite all that, all the no-kill shelters in the area is still completely overcrowded. So what would it be like if all the shelters in the county was no-kill? In summary, they are basically trying to say that a healthy stray animal can stay out on the streets since it's likely that the overcrowded environment of the shelter is not much healthier than they are than just letting them live outside. No-kill policies have made sense in theory, but they make it very difficult for shelters to keep animal populations under control.
A lot of shelters will actually work to keep their true rates of euthanasia hidden. Korean animal shelters in Busan were suspected of recording deaths from euthanasia as deaths from natural causes. The Korea Times newspaper reported, quote, "In 2022, the natural death rate was 61.2%, while the euthanasia rate was 3.1%. The city contracts 6 companies to manage stray animal shelters across its 16 districts." End quote. The dogs were reportedly sent to dog meat farms. And here's a post from the Busan Korea Alliance for Prevention of Cruelty to Animals that's promoting animal welfare, and as the name suggests, they want to prevent cruelty to animals. Shelters will also attempt to deflate their rates of euthanasia because the status of being a no-kill shelter tends to get them more support and funding. The St. Louis County ACC do this by reporting a smaller percentage of euthanasia deaths than reality. They have owners check a box marked ORE when they fill out paperwork to surrender their pets, and it isn't explained to them. ORE actually means owner requested euthanasia, and OREs are excluded from euthanasia percentages because it was requested by the previous owners. Therefore, the real percentage of euthanasia is able to be kept down. This was only discovered when volunteers reported seeing disparity between the true euthanasia rates they were seeing and what was being reported.
Okay, so basically, although the no-kill movement has become more prominent in recent decades, it is not an easy or efficient model in practicality. Animals are still often abandoned, returned, or surrendered, and the rate of animals being adopted is not at the same rate as they are being taken into shelters. So without a way to stifle the amount of strays produced annually, the no-kill movement is not practical or effective because shelters will constantly be overpopulated and lacking in resources. Additionally, some strays are already adapted to living in the streets or in the wild, where it is better to just check up on them once in a while rather than keeping them in shelters indefinitely. So, the goal of all shelters in the end is to make sure that animals are cared for, that they're healthy, and that they're happy. No-kill shelters will do this by keeping their animals there until they are happy and find available homes for them. And while this is good, it creates a problem with not having enough vacancies to take in more animals that would also be in need of their help. The argument against kill shelters is that it is inhumane to euthanize healthy animals to make space. Consider, however, that kill shelters are not places whose end goal is to kill all animals. They're not the big bad of the argument who heartlessly do away with perfectly healthy animals. Because after all, the end goal of all animal shelters, the reason why they exist is to provide a good environment for as many animals as possible. So pro-kill shelters are simply trying to find a solution to the problem of overcrowding. In that case, the focus should not be whether animals should be euthanized or not. The, the problem in question is what alternatives can we find to make space for animals that are not euthanization. No-kill shelters, they don't have an answer for that yet. And until they do, kill shelters will continue to exist because they are necessary. Our opinion on the matter is that although the motivation behind the no-kill movement is understandable and the intention behind these shelter policies are good, the U.S. simply has too high of a number of strays to simply have them be kept in shelters and adopted out. The population needs to be kept in check and ideally minimized. There are many ways to do this, and the most effective is to just nip the problem at the bud as best as possible, or just to target the reproduction. By implementing reproductive control measures like TNR or the Trap, Neuter, and Release program, we are preventing strays from being born on the streets from other strays. We're also believing that focusing on sheltering animals that are suffering on the streets rather than all animals that are living on the streets would help with overcrowding in the shelters. While we believe that the idea of no-kill shelters and achieving no-kill status everywhere is noble, there are simply too many variables for it to be the best course of action for the well-being of the overall population of animals. The focus should be on stemming the amount of animals being left out in the first place. In other words, we should focus on balancing the ratio of animals entering and leaving shelters before implementing no-kill policies, because if it's not at least 1-to-1 ratio, then it really wouldn't make sense because there's always going to be leftovers. Anyways, here are the resources for this video and this set of slideshows. And yeah, that's it. Thank you.